The subcommittee will come to order to receive testimony concerning the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, the JSF program. I want to welcome our panel of distinguished witnesses, Dr. Michael Gilmore, Director of Operational Test and Evaluation, Dr. Michael J. Sullivan, Director of Acquisition and Sourcing, Government Accountability Office, and a good Southwest Ohioan, the Honorable Sean Stackley, Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition, and Lieutenant General Christopher C. Bogdan, F-35 Program Executive Officer. Because we were held up for votes, I'm going to enter my statement for the record if there's no objection, and we'll also enter Ms. Sanchez's record statement in for the record, and we'll proceed right to the statements of our witnesses, which I believe we'll start with Dr. Gilmore, correct? Dr. Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. In my opening statement, I'll focus on readiness for operational test and evaluation. My estimate is the program won't be ready to begin IOT&E until mid-calendar year 2018 at the earliest. That'd be about a one-year delay relative to what the program is carrying currently as its objective dates, and about 6 months relative to its threshold dates. The reasons are the following. The most complex mission system testing remains, as does verification of fixes to significant problems, some of those fixes already having been identified and some not. Mission system stability, including the radar, still a problem. Inadequate fusion of sensor information from sensors on the same aircraft as well as among different aircraft continues to be a problem. There are shortfalls in electronic warfare, electronic attack, shortfalls in the performance of the distributed aperture system, and other issues that are classified. With regard to mission systems, stealth aircraft are not invisible. To achieve success against the modern stressing mobile threats, we're relying on our $400 billion investment in F-35 to provide. Mission systems must work in some reasonable sense of that word, and we must provide every incentive to the contractors to make the mission systems work leading up to and after IOT&E, in my view. The program has now changed its approach from schedule-driven software releases, which had overlaid old problems on top of new problems, to a capabilities-based approach. So now the program is addressing the significant deficiencies with a given version of software prior to proceeding with the next version, and I certainly commend that approach. And that should help work through and solve some of these problems that I've mentioned with mission systems. Other reasons IOT&E is likely to be delayed include the need for weapons testing and certification. The rate at which that has been done in the past must triple in order to get all the events done. There's been talk of cutting the number of events by 2/3. If that occurs, that would simply shift the work to IOT&E and make essentially certain late discoveries of problems requiring fixes during IOT&E. The program is exploring ways to up the rate of testing, including using ranges at Eglin, and that would be a good decision, but decisions and action need to be taken soon. There's also the issue of certification of full weapons usage throughout the full flight envelope. The most recent test community estimates are that that would occur in October 2017 for F-35A, February 2018 for F-35C, and May 2018 for F-35B. Some, and we are looking at this, some have proposed an incremental rolling start to operational test. That may not be practical, and it was certainly problematic when we tried it on F-22. There's still problems with the Autonomics Logistics Information System, which is critical to operations of the combat operations of the aircraft. There are many resource-intensive workarounds still required. Under the program's current schedule, Alice 3.0, the full capability version required for IOT&E, would not be released until the first quarter of 2018. There's also the need for concurrency-driven extensive modifications required to early lot aircraft bought for IOT&E when it was thought that IOT&E would begin in 2013. The current unmitigated, meaning no measures taken to correct the problem, schedule shows mods extending into third quarter calendar year 2019. The program is, however, working on a multi-pronged approach, including using later production aircraft slated for operational use and taking hardware from recently delivered aircraft on the production line that could move the completion of those modifications into 2018, and a decision is needed now on that. There are also inadequacies in the U.S. reprogramming lab that is used to generate the mission data files, which are essential to the success in combat and certainly success in operational testing of the aircraft. The program's optimistic schedule for delivery of a validated, but in my view, very possibly inadequate mission data file for operational testing is the third quarter of 2017. But that date assumes the U.S. reprogramming lab receives a fully capable version of Block 3F by April 2016, next month, which we already know under the program's current plans will not happen until this summer at the soonest. So for all these reasons, I suspect that we won't be ready for operational testing until mid-calendar year 2018. Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss the progress on the F-35 program today. I have a written statement that I'll submit for the record, and I just want to summarize 5 of the major points in that statement in my oral remarks. First, the Department is now planning to add new capability, known as Block 4, to the F-35 beyond its baseline capability, and is planning to manage that effort as part of the existing program, rather than establishing a separate business case and baseline for this new work. This has significant implications as far as the Congress's role and oversight. This modernization effort is like a new program with estimated cost of about $3 billion over the next 6 years. That price tag alone would qualify it as a major defense acquisition program in its own right, and it should be managed as such so that it is subject to the same statutory and regulatory reporting as any other program its size. The F-22 provides precedent for this. It began its modernization effort as part of the existing baseline program, and it eventually established a separate business case and developed into a major acquisition program with its own milestone B in order to better track progress and cost changes. Second, although the program has been managing costs very well since 2010, the Nunn-McCurdy breach back then, and cost estimates have actually decreased since then. It still poses significant affordability challenges for the Department and the Congress. As production begins to increase and the program begins procuring more aircraft each year, the Department is expected to spend about $14 billion per year over the next decade, and will average about $13 billion per year over the next 22 years until all planned purchases are complete in 2038. These annual funding challenges will compound as the program begins to stack its funding needs against other large acquisitions such as the bomber program, the tanker program that is ongoing, the Ohio-class submarine replacement, the new carrier, and many other very large programs. It's important to note that this is just the remaining acquisition cost for the F-35. As we all know, the cost to operate and maintain the F-35 across its entire life cycle is estimated now at about $1 trillion, which is added to that overall price tag. My third point is software development and developmental flight testing of the F-35 are now nearing completion, but the program faces challenges in getting all of its development activity completed on time. I think Dr. Gilmore covered that pretty well. It is through with 80% of its developmental flight test. It has completed the first 3 blocks of software, and it is now working to close out flight testing of its final block of software, Block 3F. That's the critical block of software, as it will provide the full warfighting capabilities required for the F-35. Program officials have stated that there could be as much as a 3-month delay. We've done our own analysis, and we think it could be more in line with 6 months, and I think Dr. Gilmore's analysis indicates even longer than that. Fourth, with regard to technical risks on the program has most recently found fixes for its engine seal problem that we were talking about last year and the design of the helmet-mounted display. And it has begun to retrofit aircraft with those fixes. They're not all in, but the solutions are there. 2 new challenges have recently been identified. One concerns the ejection seat, and the other concerns the wing structure of the carrier variant. The program is working now to find solutions to each of those problems. I think on the ejection seat, they have a pretty good concept figured out to solve that one. It should also be noted that the Autonomic Logistics Information System, known as ALIS, continues to be challenging and has been cited as one of the most significant outstanding risks to the program today, and that has a lot to do with operations and maintenance, as you know. Finally, manufacturing and production data continue to show a positive trend toward more efficient production. The amount of labor hours it's taking to build each aircraft continues to go down. Quality is increasing, and engineering changes have been reduced significantly. While there are still issues with late parts, this is consistently improving as well. Contractor is now delivering aircraft on time or ahead of schedule. We continue to track the measures for the aircraft's reliability and maintainability. And while they still fall short of expectations, they continue to improve, and there is still time to achieve the program's required goals at the right time. I will close with that. I look forward to your questions.
General Bogdan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Terminer, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to address the committee regarding the F-35 program. My purpose here today is to provide you a balanced assessment of where the program stands. That means I'll tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly about the program, and tell you what my team is doing to reduce costs on the program and improve the F-35's performance and meet our schedule commitments. Overall, the F-35 program is executing fairly well across the entire spectrum of acquisition to include development and design, flight test, production, fielding, base stand-up, maintenance and support, and building a global sustainment enterprise. The program is at a pivot point and is now rapidly changing, growing, and accelerating. We will be finishing our 15-year development program in late 2017 and beginning to transition to a leaner, more efficient follow-on modernization program. We'll see production grow from delivering 45 aircraft in 2015 to delivering over 100 aircraft in 2018 and up to 145 aircraft by 2020. Additionally, in the next 4 years, we will continue to stand up 17 new operating bases all over the world. We're also accelerating the creation of our heavy maintenance and repair capabilities and supply chain throughout the globe, including the Pacific, European, and North American regions. However, the program is not without risks and challenges, as these come with any program of this size and complexity. I'm confident that the current risks and issues we face can be resolved and we'll be able to overcome future problems and deliver the full capability that we've committed to. I've often said that the mark of a good program is not that it has no problems, but rather that it discovers problems, implements solutions, improves the weapon system, and at the same time keeps the program on track. I believe we've been doing that for a number of years now. Let me highlight a few of our recent accomplishments since our last hearing. Last year, we began U.S. Air Force and partner pilot training at Luke Air Force Base, where a blend of U.S. and partner F-35 instructor pilots are helping train U.S. and other partner pilots. The Air Force is now receiving F-35As at Hill Air Force Base in Utah, and training is underway to ready its first combat-coded squadron to be operational this year. Also, the United States Marine Corps successfully flying and deploying to austere sites for training, dropping and shooting live weapons with its F-35Bs. In addition, industry is committed to and then successfully delivered 45 airplanes last year, including the first aircraft that was produced in Italy and assembled in their factory in Camry. From a production perspective, we've delivered a total of 172 aircraft to our test, operational, and training sites. On the cost front, the price of purchasing an F-35 continues to decline steadily, lot over lot. This is a trend I believe will continue for many years. I expect the cost of an F-35 with an engine and fee to decrease from about $108 million this year to about $85 million in 2019. As I said before, the program is changing, growing, and accelerating, but it's not without issues, risks, and challenges. So let me highlight a few of those areas. On the technical front, we have a number of risks. At the top of my list are both software and our maintenance system known as Alice. On the software front, we've seen stability issues recently with our Block 3 software, and we're currently in the process of fixing and flight testing those fixes. We've also experienced issues with the development of our next version of Alice, known as Alice 2.02, and I'm prepared to discuss these issues with you, as well as other risks and issues such as our egress system, aircraft modifications, and our reprogramming labs. I'm also prepared to discuss Air Force IOC, initial operational testing, recent U.S. Air Force and Marine Corps deployments, and the status of our partners and FMS customers. In summary, the program is moving forward, sometimes slower than I'd like, but moving forward and making progress nonetheless. We are nearing the completion of development and flight test in late 2017. We're ramping up production, standing up new bases, growing the global sustainment enterprise, and continuing to drive cost out of the program. I intend to continue leading this program with integrity, discipline, transparency, and accountability. It is my intention to complete this program within the resources and the time I've been given, and I intend on holding my team and myself accountable for the outcomes on this program. Thank you again for the opportunity to discuss the program. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stackley.
Chairman Turner, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to testify on the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program. I will provide brief opening remarks and submit a formal statement for the record. 1 year ago, we discussed with the subcommittee the challenges facing the program at that time and our plans to address those challenges. In the course of this past year, cost, schedule, and technical performance of the Joint Strike Fighter have steadily improved across each variant of the aircraft in each phase of the program: development, production, and sustainment. Known technical issues are being driven to closure, and the aircraft's capabilities, measured in terms of flight envelope, mission systems, and weapons delivery, are being steadily expanded in support of each service's requirements for initial operating capability, or IOC. As noted, production of F-35 aircraft and engines has improved from lot to lot in terms of unit cost, schedule performance, improved quality, reduced rework, and concurrency-related costs. These positive trends are being sustained while also methodically increasing our rate of production. The pacing activity on the program today is flight testing, which itself is being paced by the incremental release of warfighting capability and mission system software blocks, commonly referred to as Block 2B, 3I, and 3F. Block 2B testing completed in 2015 and provided the capability required to support the Marine Corps' declaration of IOC in July 2015. The completion of Block 3I testing has been delayed pending correction of software stability issues. In the course of the next week, we commence flight testing what is planned to be the final build of Block 3I capability designed to improve that stability, all in support of the Air Force IOC scheduled later this year. Completion of the final block, Block 3F, poses the greatest remaining challenge to completion of system development. Block 3F includes the more complex functionality of the 3 software baselines, including what is referred to as sensor fusion. Further, coding and testing of Block 3F has been impacted by resource demands, software engineers, and lab facilities associated with supporting completion of earlier software builds. These factors add up to the program's estimate of 4 months schedule risk to completion of Block 3F developmental testing. This projection still supports the Navy IOC with Block 3F in 2018. That said, we are wary that further technical issues are certain to emerge as we press on with testing, and it will be critical that the program rapidly correct these deficiencies while mitigating their impact on both test and production. The program's commitment is to mitigate these risks going forward and to do so within the bounds of the program's budget while delivering the full capability defined by the Lightning II requirements document. Meanwhile, the program's focus is increasingly shifting to operations in support of in-service aircraft. The program has accumulated 50,000 flight hours, and with 152 aircraft operating at 8 bases across the country, the warfighters' experience and feedback on the aircraft and support systems is beginning to shape the program's priorities. The Marines have 2 full squadrons in operation today and will stand up their 3rd this June. They are building momentum as the service in the vanguard of the F-35 effort, gaining capability and confidence and employing it tactically every day. They've demonstrated operations from an austere forward operating base at 29 Palms in support of the Marine Corps Combined Arms exercise. They're training British pilots as well as First Tour Marine Corps pilots in Beaufort, South Carolina. They will deploy the nation's first operational F-35 squadron less than a year from now to Marine Corps Air Station Iwakuni, Japan in January 2017. Marine pilots love this plane and the capability it brings to the Marine Corps Air-Ground Task Force. Meanwhile, delivery of Air Force F-35A aircraft at Eglin Air Force Base are completed. Training for Air Force International partner pilots at Luke Air Force Base continues to ramp up, and the Air Force First Operational Squadron is filling out at Hill Air Force Base, with 7 aircraft at Hill and remaining aircraft completing modifications to support IRC. Separately, the Navy has gained extensive experience demonstrating launch, recovery, handling, and support of the F-35C during at-sea trial periods aboard the aircraft carriers Eisenhower and Nimitz, and a 3rd sea trial scheduled for later this year. 2 key points regarding operations and sustainment require mention. First, with particular regard to aircraft reliability, maintainability, and availability, or RM&A, 1 year ago, we reported that overall performance in this area was poor and trending poor. Concerted efforts by the government industry team have reversed those trends. And while we have much work remaining, improvements to design, parts availability, maintenance training and support, and tooling are yielding improved performance in the key metrics. Our M&A will remain a principal focus area for the program in the years ahead. Second, the program is working closely with the services, our international partners, and industry to formulate an operating and support strategy for the program, including the business plan that will accompany the strategy and an overarching O&S war on cost. A critical element of the O&S plan is the Autonomic Logistic Information System, or ALIS. ALIS continues to mature, improving with each version fielded. In the near term, we'll be testing a new version, ALIS 2.0.2, which we expect to support the Air Force IOC. Additionally, to improve turnaround time for fixing issues highlighted by fleet maintainers, we have commenced delivery of service packs aimed to be more timely and responsive to the warfighter's immediate needs. In the long term, however, ALIS has yet to meet its full promise, and we will need to go the full distance in that regard if we're going to succeed in meeting our goals for reducing the ownership cost and increasing the operational availability for this complex aircraft. And we're committed to that end. In summary, the F-35 program is making solid progress across the full spectrum of development, production, testing, and fielding of capability. As known issues are retired, new issues will emerge, and these too will be wrestled to closure. The program's forecast for delivery of initial operating capability for each of the services, including risk, is largely unchanged from 1 year ago. Yet, the size and complexity of this program and the capability it represents is such that a great amount of work remains ahead, leading to each ensuing IOC and subsequent operations and sustainment and modernization of the aircraft. We are careful to neither minimize our assessment of the inherent risks nor to avoid them, but rather to assess them realistically and manage them aggressively. The warfighter and our international partners deserve nothing less. Mr. Chairman, again, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the Joint Strike Fighter program. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, gentlemen. I want to start with a question that goes to the public's perception of this plane, of the F-35. We all are very much aware of the difficulties that the F-35 has had both in development and in production, and certainly in getting to operational capability. But I was surprised the other morning to wake up in my own hometown. Mr. Sullivan, you hail from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, so you may have similarly seen a huge headline across the Dayton Daily News that says, "Ohio voters favor canceling jet fighter." Well, I thought it was kind of interesting for on a couple of reasons. One, no one called me to ask me to quote for it, and it's my local newspaper. But it's a Washington bureau that quotes a University of Maryland study that then quotes a response from a Washington think tank. And so I want to give you guys who actually know about the F-35 an opportunity to discuss what this article raises. Because there's a fundamental flaw in the study that gives the screaming headline of Ohio voters favor canceling the jet fighter. Apparently, they did an online poll. When we all know the reliability of online polls, of course. But there are 520 registered voters in Ohio, and it concludes that Ohio voters favor upgrading current fighters instead of going forward with the F-35 and resulting in a $97 billion savings to taxpayers by 2037. Now, obviously, we have not done a very good job of communicating the importance of the F-35 and its capability and why it's necessary. But the article does, I do want to give Jack Torrey, the author of the story, credit. He does end with Lauren Thompson, Chief Executive Officer of the Lexington Institute in suburban Washington, with this quote: "It is impossible to upgrade any of our Cold War fighters that would be as survivable as a stealth plane. That is the biggest single appeal of the F-35, that most enemy radars simply can't see it. You can't shoot down what you see." So the article concludes with an interesting point, but the fact that a poll is taken asking people would they rather upgrade something that's not upgradable rather than proceed with the F-35 probably is something that bears our discussion. General Bogdan, help us here so we can give people some information so they can feel the importance of the investment in the F-35.
Yes, sir. I have to be a little bit careful because
I want to recognize, let me say it for you. I want to recognize that a portion, obviously, of the F-35 capabilities go into the classified realm, and its adversaries' capabilities are in the classified realm. So some of the capabilities of the F-35, the need for the F-35 cannot be discussed, but certainly the concept that this is fifth generation and that we cannot merely just plug and play with our old generation is probably worthy of a discussion.
Yes, sir. I agree with you. I have never been associated with a program in my 25-plus years of acquisition where the public perception and the reality are so different. Part of that is our problem for not telling the story. But part of it is because the program is so big that every minor issue becomes a big issue. We've had a past that has not been conducive to people believing in what we say. We've added years and billions of dollars to the program in the past, even though that hasn't happened since 2010. People remember that. And it sometimes is difficult to explain to the public how air warfare is changing and how it is not a turn and burn airplane that looks really cool at an air show that's going to win the fight for the United States when we go into combat in the next 20 or 30 years. So we do have a perception problem, and we do have an information gap there. What do we do about that? First and foremost, I do want to thank the Congress for helping us. You do, and you do that in a number of ways. One, you help us by holding us accountable. And when people know that you're holding us accountable and we base what we do and say on our results, then people will start having a better understanding and a better trust in what this weapon system can do. On the department side, and this is where I have to be careful because I shouldn't be necessarily a salesman for the F-35. You need me to be a little more balanced than that. But for our warfighters, there's clearly a role for them to play in advocating for this airplane. And in the past, we haven't done a great job of that simply because the airplane was immature. We were only operating at a number of locations, and we're still developing it. So let me just give you a few things that are going to happen this year that might change that a little bit. The Air Force has stood up an F-35 heritage flight, which means that the F-35 is now going to be publicly displayed in many, many places over the next year. In fact, they have 14 public events between now and the end of 2016. Some of the places including Luke Air Force Base, Langley Air Force Base, Fort Lauderdale, New York City, Chicago, Baltimore, Reno, Las Vegas. So the Air Force is getting out there with the airplane to these air shows and is going to start talking to folks about the airplane. The U.S. Marine Corps and the Navy, similarly, when they go to sea this year for their sea trials, will bring media with them so that they can tell their story. The Dutch, who are a partner on this program, are planning on bringing their 2 airplanes to the Netherlands in June for 2 weeks for the very thing that you just talked about, Congressman Turner, to introduce the airplane to their public, to talk about it, and to talk about why the airplane is needed for them. The U.S. Marines, the U.S. Air Force, and the U.K. will bring 5 airplanes to Farnborough and Riyadh this year in July at the U.K. Air Show. So I think getting out there and telling the story is part of what we need to continue to do. I also think we need to continue to base things on fact. And when people out there don't have the facts, then it's my job and my team's job to correct the record for that.
And General Bogdan, then in getting to the issue of facts, this poll asked people would they rather upgrade the current fighters instead of proceeding with the F-35. Mr. Tom, I think it's Mr. Thompson. Lauren Thompson said it is impossible to do what they've asked. You cannot upgrade our Cold War fighters. Would you agree with the statement of Thompson? And would you want to elaborate?
Yes, sir. You can only do so much with our 4th generation fighters today. You can only add so many upgrades and structurally improve them to last a certain period of time. But what I will tell you from the knowledge I have on this program and the capabilities of the F-35, our legacy airplanes now and in the future will not survive the threat environments we know we are going to have to face. So no matter how much you upgrade them and how much you put into them, eventually they will not survive. This airplane, differently, it will survive
In combat.
in combat, will survive for decades to come.
I just want to point out one thing before I ask Mr. Sullivan his comments on this. You know, this poll asks people about sticking with our current fighters through 2037. I wonder what the poll would have been if they asked people would they be willing to drive their current car through 2037. Mr. Sullivan, would you agree also that that the poll is skewed and that it gives people a false option? You can't upgrade our current fighters, as Lauren Thompson says, in any way that would be as survivable as the F-35.
I think it's clear that that this aircraft, fifth-gen aircraft, does things that the generations in the past can't do, won't ever be able to do. The stealthiness alone is a major part of this, but it's also probably more versatile. It's 3 different variants. It's replacing or complementing a number of different aircraft that are growing older every day as we sit here and are having service life extensions and things like that. So, yeah, I would agree that the F-35 is going to be a more versatile and a more powerful threat than what we have existing. But I think probably a lot of this has just come from, you know, the past is the past. I understand that, but people still see a lot of money being put forth for the F-35. But the other thing I think that you have to consider is that some of these aircraft, their production lines are shut down or they're not as hot as they used to be. And you can't, I think, as General Bogdan said, you can't plug and play these new technologies into those old aircraft anyway, so, yeah.
Mr. Sullivan, I appreciate your comments on that because you being you know, the Director of Acquisition and Sourcing for this program with the U.S. Government Accountability Office, you're responsible for giving us some of the most critical oversight information
Yes.
that we have in the program. I know you know its difficulties and the areas in which we struggle to try to make certain that the program is effective. So I appreciate your overarching statement.
And I would just say, you know, our beef has always just been with the acquisition strategy of this and many other programs. Takes way longer and costs more than they thought, but we've never really challenged the need for this or what its capabilities are eventually going to bring us.
Excellent. Mr. Stackley, Dr. Gilmore, do you wish to comment on this? Or? Great, excellent.
The fourth-generation aircraft that we have and the systems that they have, and even with upgrades, wouldn't be able to handle the threats that we've already seen being deployed by our potential enemies for over half a decade. Those are very challenging air defense threats that are mobile, so you can't count on knowing where they are. The F-35, with mission systems that work, as I alluded to in my opening statement, will provide capability that we don't have in any other platform to dynamically sense that very stressing mobile threat environment you can't know ahead of time with certainty, and deal with it. So that's why it's so important that we get the F-35, including its mission systems, to work. It will provide us capability that we otherwise won't have and can't get in upgraded systems.
Mr. Stackley?
So let me just add, our operational planning for major combat operations, first and foremost, relies upon air superiority, air dominance. Now, the F-35 is not being designed and built for the fight today. It's being designed and built for the fight in the future against the high-end threat. And so we're not willing to take risk in terms of maintaining air superiority that we will need in the 2020s, 2030s, and beyond. And the capabilities that are being brought to this aircraft are what we envision today as that necessary to overcome the threat in the future. I agree with Lauren Thompson here that somebody is offering a false choice when they say, well, you can just upgrade the existing fighters to get that level of capability. You cannot. The Navy Marine Corps does have a mixed fleet in the future of 4th and 5th generation aircraft. We will continue to have a mixed fleet at least through the mid-2030s, but we cannot enter high-end fight without the 5th generation capability that the JSF brings. That's why we're so committed to this capability.
Thank you. Very important discussion. Now turning, however, to some of the issues and difficulties that we have in making certain that this plane reaches its full potential. General Bogdan, Dr. Gilmore and Mr. Sullivan's testimony indicate that significant challenges still do remain in completing the final software block 3F. As you know, this is the version of software that gives the F-35 a full wartime capability, so it is very important. You also indicated in your testimony that Block 3F software is likely to be delivered 4 months late. What is the operational significance if this software is delivered 4 months late? Could it impact the current scheduled initial operational test and evaluation, IOTE test, and what risk mitigation actions are you taking to be able to fix this?
Thank you, sir. The issue today with the Block 3 software, and we see the problem in both our 3I or 3 initial software and in our 3F software, has to do with stability. And just very quickly, what the pilots are seeing is when they take off and they need to use the sensors, particularly the radar, there are some instances where the communication between the radar and the main computers in the airplane are mistimed, and that mistiming builds up little delays, and eventually those delays get to be big enough where the radar shuts off, okay? And the radar will recover, but it will recover and take a few minutes to regain the picture that it had. Some of the other sensors experience the same thing. That is not good. We're experiencing that kind of problem about once every 4 hours of flight time. We need the system to be much more stable than that, something on the order of once every 8 to 10 hours. So what we did when we found this problem out in the last few months is we went back and did a root cause analysis. As I just talked about, we know it's a timing issue. Lockheed Martin has a number of fixes in the software that we are about to flight test starting next week in our next version of 3I software. In the next month or so, we will know if those fixes work. If those fixes work, the stability fixes and some of the other software fixes, then the impact of this problem to Air Force IOC will be minimal. The impact to the remaining testing of 3F, as I said, will probably just delay the end of flight test about 4 months. That does not impact Navy IOC because we had some margin there, but it clearly would impact how ready the airplanes are for IOT&E. We're looking forward to the flight tests that we're going to do in the next month or so to see if we have this solved. If we do have it solved, again, no impact to Air Force IOC, no impact to Navy IOC, but probably an impact overall to the end of testing, and that would eventually impact the start of IOT&E.
Mr. Bogdan, I must not have misunderstood. You were describing a problem with the software that you said would occur every one time every 4 hours, but it would be okay if it occurred every 8 to 10 hours. Isn't that still a problem with the software?
With 8 million lines of code in the airplane, it is not unusual for both legacy airplanes and modern 5th generation airplanes every now and then to have to reset one of the sensors in flight or have an automatic reset. Now, that is not an uncommon situation. What we find is if that happens more frequently and it happens at critical times, then that impacts the pilot's ability to get the mission done. But over time and historically, we've seen that somewhere between 8 and 10 hours is probably about what we can expect, and that, according to the warfighters, is good enough.
Thank you for clarifying that. Mr. Sullivan, Dr. Gilmore, would you like to comment on the 3F software?
Well, the rate at which these instability incidents were occurring with Block 2B was 1 every 30-plus hours, and now it's 1 every 4 hours, and the initial versions of Block 3I don't provide any more combat capability than Block 2B. It was supposed to be rehosting of Block 2B with the new processor. So with regard to whether 8 to 10 hours is sufficient, what you want is a low probability that during a combat mission, which can occur, which can comprise several hours, you want a low probability that one of these upsets that takes time to reset and several minutes in the middle of a fight is not acceptable. You want the time between these instability incidents to be long enough that you have a very low probability it would occur in a multi-hour combat mission. Whether 8 hours would be sufficient is something that we'll certainly be looking at IOT&E. It was much better than once every 8 hours with the Block 2B software. And again, 3I initially provided no more capability than Block 2B. Now, as we add capability and more complexity in Block 3F, you might see the numbers come down again. Ultimately, operational testing will tell us whether, what is sufficient.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, I think depending on the mission scenarios and things like that, it's certainly a critical thing. I don't know if I'd want to be a pilot and watch the screen go blank, but it's a spec, I assume it's a spec that the contractor has. They're in development, and we've talked to the contractor and the program office about this, and it's a very serious problem, but 2B had issues, and they worked through those, and I would hope they can do the same with 3I, and I think probably they'll be the same thing with 3F. So eventually, I would hope that they will work that out and get it to whatever the spec is, which I would hope would support the warfighter. And if they do that, that's why the timing is so critical, because you'd want that done by IOCs, obviously. You'd want to be able to go to IOT&E with problems like that under your belt, as opposed to adding that to the burden of the operational testers.
I'm going to ask Mr. Stackley to follow up, but I have a few other questions that I'm going to have to get through, but considering this is our last day for votes, I want to be sensitive to members who might need to leave. Since I'm the only one on this side, I'm going to ask unanimous consent if I let Mr. Stackley respond, and then the order is Mr. Johnson, Galigio, and Ms. Graham. What I'll do is I'll let each of you ask your questions, and then I'll go back to my next question, and then we'll finish up, and that way you can exit, if that's okay. Mr. Stackley?
Yes, sir. Very briefly, the 2B software is performing very stably, and I think everybody's satisfactory with its performance. The rehosting of that software into the new, what's referred to as tech refresh on the JSF, the complexity of that rehosting should not be understated. We went through that on this tech refresh. We don't anticipate as large a leap in future tech refresh, but that complexity should not be understated. That did create a reset in terms of stability, and now with each successful build of software, going back at building back up the degree of stability that we require. General Bogdan's reference to an 8 to 10 hours at this stage of the program, that probably is satisfactory. In the longer haul, Dr. Gilmore is correct. We want to get this up to a low probability of occurrence such that the pilot does not have to worry about resetting his mission systems mid-flight.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To follow up on your questions about the need for our country to invest in a fifth generation of aircraft to take over from the legacy aircraft that have been flying for decades now, the FA-18, the A-10, and the AV-8B would all be replaced by our investment in the F-35, fifth generation. And it's important to note that other nations are investing in fifth generation aircraft, the Russians, the Chinese, and that's what we mean by a changing threat environment, which America must step up to the plate, and if it intends to remain superior in the air, we must step up to the plate and invest and prepare for the long term, and that's what the F-35 enables us to do. And with respect to those who may have participated in the poll that Chairman Turner referred to and were of the opinion that we should extend the legacy fleet and rely on it for our future protection, isn't it? And I assume they want to do that because it saves money. So penny wise, pound foolish, that would apply in this kind of a situation here. Isn't it a fact that if America were to do what some prefer, which is to extend the life of the legacy fleet, isn't it a fact that operations and supply costs to extend the legacy fleet would cost approximately 4 times what operations and support cost would be for the F-35 over the next 50 years? Isn't it a fact?
Well, let me start with responding to that. I don't know about the 4 times number, but what we do know is that
Approximately.
as our aircraft age, for example, the early versions of the F-18 that the F-35Bs and Cs are going to be replacing, the A through D version, as they age, they are the cost of sustaining them, the cost of keeping them flying, the availability rates for those aircraft. They are frankly hurting us in terms of our strike fighter inventory today. So we have got to get to this next generation of aircraft in order to not just the capability, but also to retire the legacy aircraft that are costing us today. So as that timeline extrapolates out, all the legacy aircraft are going to be running into similar costs associated with sustaining a fleet that's not just old, but a lot of the sustainment is dealing with obsolete parts and capabilities that fall short of what we require for the warfighter.
Anyone else anyone else want to add to that?
Well, I would just say that I wouldn't focus as much on the cost for O&S. The Joint Strike Fighter's going to be very costly with sustainment too. It's more about the capability. You know, they need that greater capability. The fifth generation aircraft is really just far superior. You know, I think O&S costs, it would cost a lot to keep these legacy aircraft in the air. I know the Harriers are really old, and eventually they just won't be able to fly them, I would think, after a while. So there's just nothing out there. And you know, the F-16 is another aircraft that is that the F-35 is going to replace. So there's an awful lot of aircraft it replaces.
Thank you, Lieutenant General Bogdan and Secretary Stackley. The Marine Corps declared initial operational capability last year for the F-35B, and the Air Force is planning to do the same this year. This, to me, demonstrates a program that is maturing and reaching a point where it would benefit from increased production. Do you agree, and if so, what are some of the benefits and increased production rates for the F-35 program?
Let me start. First, it clearly reflects a program that is maturing. It was mentioned earlier that back in 2010, we restructured the program, and within months, we are holding to that restructured program's schedule here in 2016, and our costs at the same time are coming down in terms of production while we hold the line on development. The program is methodically increasing its production rates today. That's in terms of both the U.S. and our international partners and foreign military sales customers joining in that production. So the production rate is methodically increasing, and what we are seeing in terms of benefit is we're accelerating the learning curve on the production floor. It's driving down our costs, and as described earlier, we're seeing positive trends by every measure as it relates to both airframe and engine manufacturing. The longer term, when we complete IOT&E and getting to the full rate production decision, I think we're on track for that, again, within months, within a budget cycle. And as we march in that direction, we're looking forward to such vehicles as block buying contract and ultimately multi-year contracting to, again, further leverage the benefits of a stable design, mature production lines, and then let's buy it as efficiently as possible.
Thank you. I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Turning back to the initial operating capability concerns and the requirements for later this year, General Bogdan, in addition to software development, I understand that General Welsh is closely watching the progress of the Automatic Logistics Information System known as ALICE, as well as challenges facing aircraft software stability, which is affecting the radar. As you know, Alice was a significant area of concern raised by maintainers during our visit to the Eglin Air Force Base last year. Eglin Air Force Base last year. Please provide us with a short update on these two issues and what your concerns are concerning the IOC later this year.
Yes, sir. As I said before, within the next 30 days, we ought to know if the fixes we've put into the software on stability will take hold. And if that is the case, then we will incrementally upgrade the Air Force's airplanes at Hill Air Force Base with that version of software, and the software stability issue will not impact their ability to declare IOC. That is not the case with Alice. Alice, the next increment of capability we're delivering, as you know, is 2.02, and we were supposed to have that fielded by August of this year. I am estimating that delivery of that system is probably about 60 days late now. I'm not sure if we'll be able to pull that schedule back any. If that is the case, then it will be up to the U.S. Air Force to decide what to do in August when it comes to Alice 202, if it's going to be about 60 days late.
Anyone else wish to comment?
I would only say that, you know, we have another team within GAO that's looking in, specifically kind of looking at Alice, and I believe they have a draft report over on the Hill right now. That might be helpful to look for that. In fact, I can probably make sure that the committee gets a draft copy of that.
That'd be great. We should, because we had significant concerns for the maintenance group when we.
Yeah, we have. So this team is focused really on ONS and Alice and things like that.
Thank you.
Can I make one other comment, sir, about Alice very quickly? If you went to Eglin Air Force Base today, or if you went to Luke Air Force Base, what you'd find over the past year is not all, but many of the maintenance workarounds and burdens that we placed on the maintainers over the last few years are systematically getting improved. We're not anywhere near where we need to be with Alice, but I think what you'd get from the maintainers if you talk to them today is the fact that they do indeed see an improvement each and every time we put out a new version of software, which means the trending's going in the right direction. We just have a long way to go.
Thank you, General. One thing we know is that consumers weren't given iPhones until they were done. You have to, however, put planes in pilots' hands while you're still developing them, and so we all get to look over your shoulder as you're doing it, and we appreciate both the work of the GAO and others to ensure that we have the right to-do list, but your diligence to try to make certain we complete it. Mr. Gallego.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. General Bogdan, the original concept of the F-35 platform was to maintain about 70% similarity between the three variants in order to keep costs down on the budget. But as we know, this has not been achieved with which calls the original concept into question. Knowing this, would you support programs in the future that aim for commonality between platforms for the services, or do you think these efforts would also have too many costs and schedule overruns?
Congressman, what I've said before about joint programs is that they're hard. They're neither good nor bad, and it really depends on how you manage them, but they are indeed hard. And they're hard because when you bring together a number of different customers that may have varying requirements, it is sometimes hard to meet all of those requirements without going to the least common denominator. And so what I would tell you is a decision to move forward on any platform in the joint arena would depend on how much overlap the services see in the requirements that they have. There's opportunities outside of a joint program to benefit from commonality, using similar engines, using similar flight control systems, but to embody that in the same airplane that would try and meet the requirements of varied customers is a really hard thing to do.
I hope we'll remember that in the future. Moving on to pilots, though, in October's subcommittee hearing, you discussed the problems with the ejection process for pilots. Two of the solutions you talked about were developing lighter helmets and managing parachute timing after ejection. However, today we find out the GAO report notes that the helmet weight was not the root cause of neck injuries during ejection. What's the status of the efforts to protect our pilots? One, and with certainty, can you say that we've identified all the problems related to this issue?
Yes, Congressman. One point of clarification. There are two technical issues as to why a pilot less than 136 pounds has an added risk of injury during ejection. One of them is indeed because the helmet is too heavy, but the other is a technical issue with having to do with the way the seat fires up and the center of gravity of a light pilot. But both of those problems contribute. We have three fixes in place to remedy this. The first is a ejection seat switch that will be set by the pilot based on his or her weight. We've tested that. We're in the design phase of it, and that fix will be cut into production on our Lot 10, and we will start retrofitting airplanes with that fix in November of this year. We also have a head support panel, which is a pad that will be sewn into the risers of the parachute. That fix has been tested. It too will be incorporated into Lot 10, and it will start being retrofitted in November. Relative to the helmet weight, we needed to get the helmet down to about 4.6 pounds. We're in the process of doing that as we speak. Originally, the estimate was that that helmet wouldn't be ready for fielding until November of 2017. I can report now that that helmet will be available in November of 2016. So when we have the switch, the helmet support pad, and the lighter helmet out there in November, I believe by the end of this year we can remove the requirement of a pilot not being able to fly the airplane less than 136 pounds.
And then just to second portion of my question was, can you say with certainty that we have identified all the problems related to this issue in terms of our pilot safety and injection?
So we have 14 more sled tests and ejection tests to go between now and September. So I cannot tell you right now definitively that we won't find other things. What I will tell you is we will completely test it. If there are problems, we have a good track record of fixing them, because we will not put pilots' lives in danger by putting them in an airplane and an ejection system that's not safe.
All right. Thank you. Yield back my time.
Thank you, General Bogdan. As you are aware, a lot of our discussions between you and the committee are based upon our visit to Eglin Air Force Base and the questions that we posed as a result of that fact-finding trip. There were 14 of them. And you have continued to both answer those questions and update them. I have your March 17th, 2016 letter in response, continuing to update us on those issues. If there's no objection, I'm going to enter this into the record of your discussion on these items and the issues that we've been looking for oversight. Turning to Ms. Sally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen. I remain a strong supporter of a fifth-generation fighter, having been an airman myself. Knowing the threats that we have that are emanating, we need that capability. However, I remain concerned about the close air support, FAC-A, and combat search and rescue missions that are currently being done by the A-10 Warthog and the F-35's capabilities to replace that without increasing risk to American lives. General Bogdan, can you confirm that the F-35 requirements document is still that the F-35 would replace the A-10 and the F-16?
Ma'am, what I will tell you is the requirements document does not, the requirements document that I have on the program does not specifically say that it will replace the A-10 or the F-16. My requirements document has to do with what the capabilities of the F-35 is. The decision to replace airplanes with the F-35 is a service decision.
Okay, I think on the program page, I mean, the intent of the department, the intent of certainly the Air Force is that the F-35 will replace the A-10 and the F-16. Is that fair to say?
I would believe from the public statements I've heard from the chief and the secretary and the combatant commanders, that's a true statement.
Okay, and I think that's also on the JSF website as well for the program. On March 3rd, the Air Force Chief of Staff said in a hearing that the mission capability of the A-10 will not be replaced by the F-35. He also talked to me about this after our hearing last week. He went on to say the A-10's current workload would be handled by the F-16 and the F-15E. This was a total surprise to me to hear him say this, to be frank with you. So I'm concerned, I look at their 5-year plan, that they are going to start mothballing more A-10s next year, 49 the year after that, 64 the year after that, 98 the year after that, with finishing that in FY22. When do you think, again, we're going to be at FOC for the F-35?
Ma'am, the capabilities, the full capability of the F-35 relative to close air support will be delivered in the late 2017 timeframe. We'll have additional capabilities in our Block 4 modernization that would make that mission more viable for the F-35. And I am not sure if the Air Force has declared an FOC date yet.
Okay, but from the testimony, I think for Dr. Gilmore, I mean, we've seen the F-35A, and we've talked about this in previous hearings. Capabilities are limited, 20, 30 minutes time on station, 2 bombs, you know, excuse my language, but we call one pass, haul ass, no time to loiter, having to go to tankers, being Winchester, 182 bullets, limited night capability, inability to get data, targeting information, inability to survive a direct hit in close combat. These are all limitations we know about, I've talked about in previous hearings. So, Dr. Gilmore, I appreciate that your office has decided to do a comparison test between the F-35 and the A-10 on close air support, and I am concerned also about the combat search and rescue and the forward air control mission. Can you give us an update on that comparison test and when that is going to happen, and whether there are any concerns about funding or its continuation in another administration?
First, with regard to requirements, I've reviewed the requirements document before I came here, and there's a clear statement that at the beginning of the requirements document, which has been in force for a number of years now, that the F-35 would replace the A-10.
That's what I thought. Thanks, Dr.
I'm
Gilmore.
happy to send you a copy of that.
Please do.
In any event, with regard to...
Can I correct the record? When I talk about requirements on the program, I talk about a specification that I put contractors on to deliver a capability. The document you're talking about is a service document known as an operational requirements document,
Okay.
an ORD, which I do not control.
Okay, thanks.
And that's the one the Chief of the Air Force, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force signed.
Great.
Namely the operational requirements document. So that's what I was talking about. With regard to the close air support test, comparison test, yes, we are planning that. We're planning all the open air tests as we speak, working with the Joint Operational Test Team and the services. We expect to have that effort completed in June or July of this year, and we're happy to share those results with the committee and with you. With regard to funding, the costs of the close air support tests, including combat search and rescue and Sandy, compared to not doing them,
Right.
you know, compared to not having the A-10s fly with, you know, in conducting the same missions that the F-35s will conduct in those 2 areas, or those 3 areas, varies between $3.5 million and $5.2 million. The difference is the amount of refly that you have to do when you're doing, just like when you're doing a test, you can't count on every scenario that you're trying to run actually working.
Right.
So you have to plan in the test for refly, the same way General Bogdan is planning for refly in developmental testing. So that's the reason for the range of $3.5 million to $5.2 million. We are working to, with the Joint Operational Test Team, to fit all of these comparison tests within the budget for operational testing, which was established, I think, about 5 years ago in the TEMP that's now rather out of date, but nonetheless, we take that budget seriously. And we're working to fit all of the comparison testing within that budget. If there is, if we do go over, which again, we're trying very hard not to do because we do take that budget limit seriously, it wouldn't be by more than 10 or 15%. And I would remind the committee that that the Block 2B operational utility evaluation, which was supposed to have been done in 2015, was canceled at my recommendation 2 years ago because it was clear to me that the aircraft wouldn't be ready for that kind of rigorous operational test, and the service acquisition executives agreed, and that was a savings of about $100 million. So we're working to keep within the existing budget, and the CAS comparison testing, CSAR, and so forth is, again, a small amount of the overall cost, $3.5 million to $5.2 million.
Thanks, Dr. Gilmore. I'm over my time, but could you, when would we would have those results delivered to Congress of the test, do you think?
Well, if we begin the operational testing according to my estimate, which would be mid-calendar year 2018, the operational test will comprise about a year. It'll take about a year, and then it would be a few months after that, no more than 6, hopefully fewer.
So late
to actually finish the report.
2019, early 2020 would be
Yes.
fair? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Waltz?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you all for being here again. We really appreciate it. The strategic need for the F-35, I think everyone knows that. We hear it. It's now crunch time, though, on the delivery piece of it. And General Bogdan, you were right. There is a perception issue both in what's what they're going to get and what they expect to get. But there's also this perception that I've held, and I've used this as an example. I've been to no less than 14 hearings dealing with changes to retirement plans, taking away of the housing allowance transferability of the GI Bill benefit, commissary changes, and TRICARE. And where that relates to this is the perception out there is when the Pentagon needs to save money, they go to those programs. And I always use the example that we haven't had as many of these. So I hear statements like this from one of our partners from the Australian Defence Forces. I think it was Keith Joyner said it. He's responsible for evaluating this, and he said some systems like the radar are fundamentally worse than earlier, which is not a good sign. The next software versions, Block 4, won't be available. So here we are with bug fixes for the next 7 years, and they're looking, am I correct in this? They're reevaluating their purchases on this. So I go back home, I talk to soldiers and say anything, so I just lost a GI Bill benefit, what's happening with this? How do I talk to them about it? Is it a matter of until you deliver it, this is just gonna go on? Because I do kind of feel like I'm asked to come into the play and do my part and say this, and then it's gonna be delivered. How do I go back? How would you answer on this?
It's a tough question, Congressman, and I clearly understand the point of view here. I guess the best I would offer, if I were asked that question, is that bringing a new weapon system online to defend our country is never easy, and it always is fraught with mistakes, bad choices, technical challenges, and the history of especially developing airplanes has been murky. We've had lots of problems over the years bringing new airplanes online.
Is that a general, and that's a helpful piece. How, you have more experience in this. How similar is this to when the F-16 came on? How similar is what we're sitting here today?
The F-16 was a very simple airplane when it first came out, and over the years got more complicated, and it had setbacks. I'm not sure if you're aware, the very first flight of the F-16, sir, was an accident. They were not supposed to take off, and because of the flight control system not being properly rigged, the pilot, in order to save the airplane, had to take off. So airplanes experience this.
No, I think that's true, and I want to be clear on this, so that I'm not teeing this up just because I'm one who believes we need these systems. Is it apples to oranges because of the exponential technical differences between that launch and this launch? And I know that's kind of a hard question because we were at our technological limit then, and now maybe we're there, so it's maybe similar to that. But is it the case of that there's more things that can go wrong, so they probably will?
Sir, let me jump in and say that's absolutely the case, and it's not unique to the F-35 program. We're going after a high-end capability on this and other warfare systems that are significantly more complex than the systems that they're replacing. So there's no such thing as replacing legacy, whether it's aircraft, missile systems, ships, tactical vehicles, on a one-for-one basis, anywhere near the same cost of those legacy systems, because these are so much more capable. The comments and perceptions from folks that are not well informed on the program, those are tough to defeat, because now you're talking about an education process. The reality is that the F-35 program, albeit it has gone through restructuring, is on a path to deliver all the capability that was promised day one. It is going to cost more than what was estimated back in 2002 timeframe. Those costs were rebaselined in 2010, and we have kept those under control to the extent that now we're actually reducing costs with time as the program gets more and more mature. What you're not hearing, and I think General Bogdan touched on this earlier, is the war fighters that are flying this plane, what their perception is. And one of my comment in the opening statement was the Marines love this aircraft, absolutely love this aircraft. This is what they plan to go to war with if called upon. I think that you're gonna hear that overtake the other rhetoric over time as more and more of our Air Force, Marine Corps, and Navy pilots and our international partners climb into this cockpit, see what its capability is, train with it, and then deploy with it over time.
Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah, your question is an excellent question, and it's not just the F-35 program, it's about the acquisition process.
Yeah.
We do acquisition reform all the time, and actually it has been improving the last few years, but the bottom line answer to this is there's got to be a little truth in advertising when these weapon systems start up, because they're always started up with optimistic cost estimates and schedules. This program was originally planned to be completed, everything purchased by 2026. Now that's 2038. And so that additional 12 years of funding, this is...
And that has as much to do with this side of the table as that side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, and that's what you're talking about, is
Right.
that's the Congress is faced with unplanned, funding for 12 years that they weren't planning on when they started. And I know, it's, like I said, it's not the F-35, it's most of the major weapon systems. They just don't have a good business case at the outset. The F-16 was a really good aircraft when it was delivered, and it was simple, and it's not that simple anymore. It's a very complex aircraft because they planned it properly. They had incremental planning on that, and they did block upgrades. That's really what I think what this is all about. And so other priorities go by the wayside.
I know. Well, thank you. I yield back. Thank you, Chairman.
Ms. McSally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just do want to follow up on our discussion on requirements, just to make sure. Luckily, I flew airplanes. I never had to procure them, so this process seems a little cumbersome to me. But just, Dr. Gilmore, the Air Force Chief of Staff has said that the A-10 will not be replaced by the F-35 on the record within the last few weeks, and then said that to me in a conversation last week, surprising me. Is anyone here? Is the Air Force going to be updating their ORD or whatever you just called it?
The operational requirements document? I
To
haven't heard
to
that they
reflect
are.
that?
I haven't heard that they are, and then the F-35s are going to be replacing the F-16s. So
Right.
I'm a bit puzzled, but
So
all
if
I know
they-
is what the existing operational requirements document said.
Okay, so you know of no efforts to update that, and if it's
I'm not aware of
currently going to be replacing the A-10 and the F-16, but he's saying the F-16 is going to replace the A-10, but then the F-35 is going to replace the F-16, then we're still in the same situation where we're in specific circumstances for close air support, we potentially have additional risk or a gap or capabilities that are going to be degraded, which is why it's so important that we have this fly-off. Do you agree, Dr.
Well, that's well, I don't know whether the capabilities will be degraded.
Right.
That's what the comparison testing is supposed to show.
Absolutely, and we
And
shouldn't
that's
be
why
determining
we're planning it to be, absolutely fair. We're going to consider all the conditions under which close air support are done,
Yep.
all the different kinds of threats, and it certainly will be a challenge. In fact, the A-10 couldn't survive in the highest threat environments, but we're also looking at, less stressing threats like the ones that the A-10 is being used in, the environments it's being used in today. Urban, rural situations, buildings, vehicle personnel, different kinds of control for the close air support, different kinds of control interaction, all of the things that are done in close air support missions. We're going to set up the missions, and then the A-10 pilots and the F-35 pilots will use those two aircraft to their best capabilities using whatever TTPs they have. We're certainly not going to specify how the missions are done. We're going to specify what the mission is, and then we'll do matched pairs comparisons of how well each set of pilots and aircraft can perform those missions the way they choose to.
Great, thank you. And it seems like there's just some different messages coming out of the Pentagon. I mean, the Secretary of Defense, when he announced his budget, said A-10s will be replaced squadron by squadron with the F-35, predetermining the outcome of this test. So we're trying to get some consistency out of the Pentagon by just asking these questions. I highlighted this to the Secretary yesterday. We're going to follow up with him and the Chairman, because it just seems like even between the Air Force and the Secretary of Defense, they've got two different messages going on here. We believe that any movement forward should be conditional. Let's have the test, let's get the results of the test, and then let's make a decision afterwards as to whether we're going to be increasing risk to our troops on the ground. So I appreciate the additional time, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, and I yield back.
Thank you. Gentlemen, this is one of our most important and certainly largest programs, and I want to thank each of you for your diligence in trying to ensure that this program reaches all of the capabilities that are obviously going to be necessary. Because of that, before we conclude, knowing your diligence, I want to give each of you an opportunity, if you have anything else that you want to put on the record or that you want to raise before the committee as we consider this, knowing that your input is incredibly important. If not, I know we have your opening statements, and we continue to have your advice and counsel. We appreciate the information that you provided to the committee. Thank you.